Canada has been eliminated from the 2025 World Junior Championships after losing tonight to Czechia in a very close 4-3 game that ended with Czechia scoring within the last minute of the third period to advance to the semifinals and knocking Canada out in the quarterfinals for the second straight year. And you could make the argument that this puts a bow on the worst 2-year stretch for Canadian World Junior teams. This makes only the second time since 1981 that Canada has failed to medal in 2 consecutive years, but in that other stretch 2013-2014, Canada finished 4th in the tournament both years, just missing out on bronze. But in these last 2 tournaments, Canada has failed to make it to the semifinals both times, again making that the first time that's happened since 1981. And you can make an argument that this year's performance by Canada in the tournament was even worse than last year's disappointing flame out, because last year Canada did lose in the quarterfinals, but in the group stage they went 3-1, including a win over Finland and a close 2-0 loss to Sweden, who eventually would go on to finish second in the tournament. That flame out in the quarterfinals when they lost to guess who, Czechia, was a surprise because Canada was still seen as one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the tournament who lost to an inferior opponent. This year though, it was a completely different story. Canada looked lost throughout the group stages even. They went 2-1-1 in the group stages. Their only victories came over Finland and Germany. They lost to the Americans, and of course they lost to Latvia in that thrilling overtime game. They finished 3rd in the group stage, and as a result in the quarterfinals they faced the number 2 team out of Group B, Czechia. And even though most observers were probably thinking that Canada was going to win, it's not exactly a massive upset like it was last year. Canada also did far worse in terms of scoring in this tournament. They only scored 13 goals total. That's their lowest total since 1998, the disastrous tournament when Canada went 2-5 and finished 8th in the tournament. And that lack of offense was made even more embarrassing by the fact that Canada purposefully left off some high-scoring players from their roster, like Beckett Seneca, who just won OHL Player of the Month, Andrew Cristall, who's one of the highest-scoring players in the WHL, Michael Haig, who's a point-of-game player as a freshman at the University of Michigan, along with guys on the back end like Zane Parekh and Carter Yakimchuk, who could have provided some offensive boost with their puck-moving ability. And already things are getting nasty for the Canadian team. There's a lot of vitriol being thrown towards the players already, in particular Easton Cohen, the Toronto Maple Leafs prospect, who had himself a very bad tournament. But I really think it's unfair to lay the blame on any one player or even the players in general. They're all young teenagers. I don't like the idea of adults throwing a lot of hate at these young kids. One person though who is also getting a lot of hate that I think kind of deserves it is head coach Dave Cameron, who assembled this team and was responsible not only for some of the roster decisions that were made, but some of the line deployments and combinations, as well as the team's pretty lax practice schedule. He has come under a lot of fire throughout this tournament, and I think that's deserved. In addition to all those things I just mentioned, Canada was one of the most undisciplined teams in the tournament, and heck, at this deciding game, Canada took 29 penalties in minutes, highlighted by Cole Baudouin, who took a 5-minute major for kneeing, as well as a 10-minute game misconduct, along with 3 costly penalties in the third period before 2 unsportsmanlike conducts ended the game. And when you look at this all in a totality, you have to think that this is one of the biggest disappointments by a Canadian junior team in the program's history. I mean, other than maybe 98, which I mentioned, and those teams of the late 70s and early 80s, Canada has been consistently a top force in the World Junior Championships. And now they're going on to this tournament, and it's not even that they got upset in a shocking manner or that their opponent Czechia just got the better of them for one game. It's just very obvious that this is a very flawed Canadian team.